So my name is Dr. Mbuvi. I am a medical officer working at the Kenyatta National Hospital. And my journey into medicine started from when I was very young. I was fortunate enough. My parents were actually working, both my parents were working in Kenyatta National Hospital. And I think the influence of growing around this particular environment, because we used to stay in the what we call the sisters' flats or the residence area for the hospital. Growing up and seeing people walking around with white lab coats and things hanging around their necks, and knowing that it's them who actually impact on the health of the people, and they're the ones who take care of people when they're sick and nurture them back into good health, was a very big influence in my early life. So from that influence, and I found myself going to medical college. I actually started off at the Kenya Medical Training College, where I pursued a diploma in clinical medicine. And then after that, I actually went now and pursued my Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery degree. And when I was back, I worked briefly at other hospitals, and then I actually got employed in KNH, which was actually more like a dream come true, because I felt like I'd gone full cycle from being here as a child and then going the entire scope, and then now coming back now as a doctor, as the person who, as the people I'd looked up to when I was a child. When the whole story about COVID-19 started, and we used to hear stories about that this disease that is in China, that apparently is really ravaging the people who are there, and it's really taking a toll on them, and it's been seen in other countries and other areas, and it seems like it's spreading. Was one of the things that we saw when we were still at work. So I was working at the accident and emergency department at the time, and also sometimes partly working with what we call the infectious diseases unit in Kenyatta Hospital. So at the time when in 2020, when now COVID was now seen that this thing is actually coming, and we need to be prepared as a country in order to at least be able to protect our citizens, and also be able to manage the patients who may actually get affected, because we knew it was coming. It was only just a matter of time. So the hospital had made preparations to have a center opened up where we'll be able to deal with any patients who came in and were suspected to have COVID-19, and even those ones who were confirmed to have COVID-19. So this one was basically at the infectious diseases unit hospital, which was at Mbagathi, on the grounds of Mbagathi Hospital, but it was being run and managed by Kenyatta. So I was part of the initial team that was sent to the Mbagathi facility to actually just prepare and see how we can be able to handle the cases that will be coming in. Part of the reason why I was selected was because I had also undergone some training in terms of Ebola, and in terms of outbreaks such as that. I was one of the doctors who had been trained in that through KNH. So when I was sent to the COVID-19 unit, that is where now we were to start. So initially we had two centers where we were running, taking care of COVID-19 patients. We had the Mbagathi facility, and we also had our infectious disease unit that is here within the Kenyatta Hospital grounds. So the first patients who came in who were suspected to have COVID-19 were actually housed at the infectious disease unit here at Kenyatta National Hospital, and that is where I was working. And we had cases, we had patients who were there who were suspected to have COVID-19. And at that time, most of the swabs that we were taking for the test to know whether these patients actually have COVID-19 or not were actually being sent all the way to South Africa. So there was quite a long period of time that we had to sit with these patients and actually just wait for the results to come in. But I think slowly, as now the government and the Ministry of Health and Kenyatta National Hospital began to realize that this thing is actually, there are higher chances that we might actually get someone who's COVID-19 positive in the country. So the national lab, so the name is disappearing a bit. Influenza lab, yes, the national influenza lab actually started doing the tests for us as well. So we will get the samples from the patients, and we will send them to the national influenza lab, and they will do the tests for us. And then we will get the results, and if the patient was actually found to be negative, we will actually discharge them. Majority of these patients were actually people who had flown into the country, and due to the government ways of how to mitigate spread of COVID-19 was that anyone who came in, those are criteria that they were using for any person who was flying into the country that needed to be quarantined or isolated, tested, and then if the tests came out negative, then they would be released to go home. So we had a few of those people with us at the center. Now, so the first part of it, January, February of 2020, was actually just clockwork like that. So we will just have the patients. We had our protective personal equipment, and most of these things that we were learning from what has been happening in China and what has been happening in the rest of the European states and in the US. So we were borrowing the protocols that they were using, the measures they were taking, the kind of personal protective equipment that they were wearing. The one thing that I have to say over the entire period of COVID-19, from the time it started to the time when now it was declared that now we can actually go back to normalcy, is that the support that the team that we were in, the guys who were actually working on the front line in COVID-19 for KNH, one thing I can say that I would give very good commendations to the hospital. The hospital ensured that we had all the things that we needed in terms of personal protective equipment, in terms of how our shifts were scheduled. The hospital actually allowed us to be able to follow the protocols that are being given by the Ministry of Health and by the national government, and also to just tailor-make those particular protocols to suit our needs as we are on the ground. Because in most instances, you'll find that things are not a direct copy and paste situation, that you will get something, but you also need to figure out what are the things that we are facing on the ground. How do we take these protocols and utilize them and actually tailor-make them for us to be able to give the best to our patients and also ensure the safety and protection of the healthcare workers who are actually working within these units. Mm-hmm. So KNH, through the CEO and through the board, did an excellent job, in my humble opinion, in terms of just ensuring that we had all the things that we needed at that time to combat this disease. So January, February, it was okay. We're getting negative results. We will discharge people, they will go home, and things like that. Then March happened, and the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed. And I was actually at the unit on that day when it was announced by the then cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Health, when he announced that now we have our first case of COVID-19. And I think the feeling at that time was a feeling of dread. We actually got a bit scared because we had seen what COVID-19 had done in China. We had seen what COVID-19 was doing in Europe and in Italy at that time. We were seeing how people were dying. And I think there was a notion around in the world that if countries such as China, if countries such as Italy and all these other European states, people are dying in numbers, what is going to happen in Africa? A continent that is considered that our healthcare system is not up to par, or it's not up to par with the likes of Europe, with the likes of China, because a majority of scientific and medical innovations usually come from these particular countries. And yet, we could see how they were being ravaged, how people were dying on a daily basis in large numbers. So, of course, it was a very scary moment for us. The fact that I think for the first, January and February, we were just okay. We knew, we're dealing with COVID-19. We're wearing PPEs. We are seeing these patients in the ward. But most of the time, the results are coming back negative. And then the first case happened. And then that's when reality actually hit us. And we were like, okay, so this thing is actually here. Now, it's here. We have now to figure out how we need to be extra careful and to start doing things a bit better. We need to be a bit more careful about how we handle our patients and how we actually utilize the protocols that we have. So at this point, the Mbagathi unit was now fully operational. At that time, it was designed to be about a 150-bed capacity hospital that will be able to cater for all our needs in terms of addressing the COVID-19 pandemic. And at that time, after the first case was confirmed, the days that followed, the weeks that followed, the months that followed, the numbers just kept going up. Now, at that time, the protocol was, if you're found to be COVID-19 positive, you have to be isolated. And you have to be isolated in a hospital or in a facility that is designed specifically to cater for COVID-19. So now we started receiving patients in our Mbagathi facility, people who are found to be COVID-19 positive. The good thing I can say about that initial part of the COVID-19 pandemic was that the patients we were getting were not exactly patients we will say who were like on their deathbed. These were actually vibrant people. They were young people. Yes, they were COVID-19 positive, but they were actually okay. They did not require any like specialized care in terms of intensive care. They just needed to be isolated. We treat the symptoms that come with the condition, and then after that, once we do the we do the tests for COVID-19, and we find that they have gotten like 2 consecutive negative tests in a 48-hour period. We consider that it's safe for them to be discharged and to go back to the community. Now, the COVID-19 story at that time, from my perspective, took 2 different approaches. So I think I'll talk about what we experienced as healthcare workers, and then also what we saw in terms of the patients that we were dealing with in the facility. So as healthcare workers, like I said, KNH did a tremendous job to ensure that we had all the equipment that we need. I can honestly say there's not a single day that I reported to work that I lacked personal protective equipment. And this was not, it was not that I recycled things. They were actually full brand new PPEs that I can pick any day, wear them, and I can go see the patients, give them medication that we need to give, and actually just do our work the way we're supposed to do it. And we were not entirely scared about, we were kind of scared about COVID-19, but we knew that if we follow the correct protocol, if we follow the correct measures, if we have our PPEs in check, we will not have any, we're not anticipating to have any accidental exposures and things like that. The protocols at that time also said that as long as you're working in a COVID-19 unit, I think after every 2 weeks, it was after every 2 weeks, you have to be tested. So we used to undergo that testing. And honestly speaking, that was one of the most... okay, having something shoved into your nose is not a nice thing. And then having it being done after every 2 weeks was not interesting, but it was part of the protocols, and we had to follow the protocols so that we ensure that our own safety was also guaranteed. So the thing that I noticed at that time for healthcare workers, I think it's human nature. The people who work in the COVID-19 unit at that time, we did face a lot of stigma from the general public, and even sometimes from our own colleagues who are not working in the COVID-19 unit. And we understand why. COVID-19 was a disease that was killing people in their hundreds. And we were the people who were on the front line, literally working, literally taking care of the people who actually had COVID-19. So the rest of the people who are not working in these units had a certain fear of us, because they consider that we are exposed as well. So if they come into contact with us, they might also get exposed. That was number one, is on the side of healthcare workers. But as time continued, and people now we continued learning more and more about what COVID-19 is, how is it spread, how do you stop the spread, how do you ensure your safety and ensure the safety of your patients and ensure the safety of your colleagues who you're working with, the stigma started dying down. So that was on the side of the healthcare workers. If you look at the side of the patients who we were managing in the facility, the stigma levels for those patients were actually astronomical levels. At that time, if you remember, it was the test is done, the ministry, you're considered, your test is found to be positive, and they send an ambulance to your house with a team of people dressed in white and fully, PPE covered, and they come and they remove you from your house and they take you to hospital for treatment. Now, what used to happen was, when we would discharge these patients and we will tell them, okay, now it's time for you to go home, many of them were scared to go back because of that trauma that they experienced. And also the fact that their relatives who are left in the houses, the neighbors were actually telling them, you guys need to move out because you guys are going to expose us. You have COVID-19. We don't want our estate or our neighborhood to be tainted, so you guys have to leave. There was a lot of stigma that was going on at that time. Now, so of course we actually put this forward to the management, and we told them, this is what we are seeing with the patients on the ground. These are the situations that these people are going through. And again, kudos to KNH. The management went full to support them. They hired counseling psychologists for them. So we had a team of counseling psychologists who were not only there for the patients, but were also there for us as the staff. Because honestly speaking, if you're in a place where you're working and you know that I am constantly putting my life in danger in order to help a particular patient, there's a certain toll, there's a certain stress that it takes upon you. And if you don't have someone who you can talk to, someone who can relate to what you're doing, or someone who can be able to help you work through those emotions, that build-up can become a challenge later on in the future. So credit to the fact that we had counseling psychologists who were hired specifically for the COVID-19 area. And it was a wonderful team of counselors because they fully understood what we were up against. They fully understood what the patients who were inside the facility were facing. And through that, we were able now to at least have proper counseling sessions for the patients. And they also had a chance now to, tell their stories as well, to tell us how, what kind of stigma they're going through. And some of them will actually tell us how they actually ended up getting COVID-19 in the first place. So it was a very positive thing that came out of a very dark part that we were going through. And now coming to understand the importance of mental health, not just in COVID-19, but also in general in the medical field, regardless of whatever condition you're facing, and knowing that you can have someone who's a counselor who can actually be able to take you through the steps and help you go through any condition that you're going through at any given time, was actually one of the things that was a light bulb moment, I think, during the COVID-19 period, that we came to understand the importance and the value of having mental health specialists there with us to take care of not only us as the healthcare workers, but our patients as well. Those are some of the nuances and the things that we were going through in the COVID-19 unit. So as COVID-19 was progressing, we started having like ups and downs of the curve. So there are times the numbers will go like really, really high, and our unit will be packed. We would have so many patients inside there, and we were just taking our steps, following the protocols that were being released by the ministry through their relations with the specialists. And we were lucky enough as KNH to have our specialists who are there, our infectious disease specialists who are there with us. And they were part of the team that was helping to curate these protocols that were being used, not only just in KNH, but in the entire country. So there are times when COVID-19 numbers will rise and rise and rise, and the workload will become a lot. And there was a strain, and we had to like go put 150% of what we normally do just to ensure that things are running properly. And then a time will come when the numbers will just start dropping, and we will discharge patients. Our numbers will go down, and we will be fine. Then again, another spike will happen, and an increased number of people will come back in with COVID-19, and we will manage them. I can say the good thing about the first part, what I call the first part of COVID-19, was that in as much as unfortunately we had a few people who passed on, it was not to the numbers that the rest of the world anticipated. And I think that was one of the things that I thank God on a daily basis for that, because the thought and what even was there at that time was that if COVID-19 lands in Africa, Africa is done. We are all finished. We will not be able to control this thing. We will not be able to handle it. If it's this bad I'm using China, Italy, and Spain, because those ones were they were really ravaged. And then India also at some time also got really, really bad. But on our side, at least we were able to contain it, and we managed it. And we were able to say, thank God we are not losing people the way we had anticipated. And then the various variants of COVID-19 started happening. And I think the one that really took us on a proper ride was the Delta wave. The Delta variant of COVID-19 was one of the deadliest that we had seen at KNH as us who were working on the front lines, because at that time is when now we began to see people who were coming in and they were really, really badly off. We had a specific COVID-19 intensive care unit. So the COVID-19 unit that was here at Kenyatta National Hospital was now converted into an intensive care unit specifically for COVID-19. And we will get these people who will come from home, and someone has been having COVID-19 for let's say like 3-4 days, has been confirmed, and then now they come in and their lungs are completely destroyed. They are unable to breathe properly on their own. And now we had to go that extra mile and now put them in intensive care. And this meant using things like what you call the high flow nasal cannulas that were able to give oxygen of up to let's say 70 liters per minute. And if that failed, then now we had to go there, what you call the invasive way. Now we had to put them on a ventilator and have the ventilator now breathe for them. And the oxygen requirements at that time for the patients that we were seeing were crazy. It was bad. As in our oxygen center used to be replenished, I think after every day they had to come back and put in more oxygen because there was a really big consumption of oxygen at that time. And unfortunately that was the time when majority of the patients actually also died, because they had really, really bad disease. The disease was quite serious, and for a good majority of them is that we had patients who had now other comorbidities, now other illnesses, your diabetes, your hypertension, and now they get COVID-19, and it just becomes a whole other story. So during my time, during that first part, and now when we were getting to the Delta wave, I was still working at the Mbagathi facility, and then I was now transferred to the intensive care unit in the one that is in KNH. So the interesting thing about coming to this particular unit was, I think, so in as much as everything that was going on, that we were dealing with very critical patients, I think the highlight for me personally, on my personal side, was I actually got an opportunity to work with my mom. My mom is a nurse, and she was actually working at that facility at the same time. So her and I were actually working. We find ourselves the same shift, and I'll be there. I'm the doctor. I'm giving instructions. She's the nurse. She's there. She's giving medications. It was a nice thing. I think there's a certain joy that you get from actually doing something with your parent. It was actually quite nice. But at the same time, it was also quite scary for me because this is my mom, and at that time she was just nearing, she was about to get to her retirement age. So I was also scared for her. I was also like, I don't want you to be working here. But my mom is she's very, she loves what she does. She's been a nurse for a very long time. She's worked in KNH her entire life, and her joy is just doing her job as a nurse. And there's nothing that you could tell her to stop. We knew her passion is, she's dedicated, so I was just like, oh, it's fine. At least I'm here with her. I can keep an eye on her. So that was my joy for me at that time. So we stayed in the intensive care unit. We were seeing our patients, they were coming in. And one of the other thing that we noticed at that particular time was the pressure that was coming in from even just the rest of the country. We will be getting calls all the way from Wajir, from Kisumu, Eldoret. People want to transfer their COVID-19 patients to an intensive care unit. Because at that time, I think the whole aspect of, if you look at it from the financial perspective of running an intensive care unit, it's quite costly. It is quite costly. And then now you're dealing with a condition that has been declared a pandemic. It's affecting everyone. So now you can't really discriminate and say, ICU is meant for people who have money and, the people who can afford it. But now you have a disease that is affecting everyone, and anyone can find themselves so badly off that they actually need that ICU bed. So we will get calls, so many calls from so many hospitals just asking, is there a bed available for an ICU? We have a patient who we need to transfer. Kudos to county governments who actually responded to that call and opened up various ICUs in their particular areas. But on our side as KNH, we did the best that we could. I can say that, because if we actually had a bed available and our hospital makes the call and we're actually able to receive that patient, and we know that you can actually give good care to that patient, the patient will actually come and they will actually receive the care that they needed. So that was how we were able to manage COVID-19. We will deal with the vaccines and the way they will come. We will adjust accordingly to how the situation will be. If there was a need to increase the number of doctors, the number of nurses, the number of counselors working at the facility, because our numbers were going up, the hospital was able to do that for us. In the event where the numbers will go down and now we can be able to release a few people to go home and at least rest and recuperate, and as our numbers have gone down, we were able to do that. And then as the numbers begin to spike, guys come back into work and we were able to continue like that. So I think on my part, we did a commendable job in terms of how we took care of our COVID-19 patients, especially at KNH. I think we did a lot. We handled a lot of cases. And the other aspect of dealing with COVID-19 is that when a disease becomes the centerfold of the whole world, people tend to focus on it more. Now, the downside of that is people tend to forget that the other diseases have not disappeared. They're still there. People will still get into road traffic accidents. People will still require surgery. People will still have hypertension. They will still get stroke. Diabetics will still become diabetic. We still need to manage them. And then now, the intricate play of how we were dealing with patients who had multiple conditions and also had COVID-19 as well became one of the challenges that we had as KNH. And I keep saying this, and I think even many of the times that I've talked to people about my experience in KNH in terms of COVID-19, I usually tell them, for you as a person on the ground, you're the person who's dealing with this patient. The most important thing for you is to have, as in your backup needs to be on point. The people who are standing behind you, the people who are actually propping you up for you to do your job, they need to be strong people. And that is one of the things that we saw at KNH.